Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Miller, your host. I want to thank our sponsor, Farm to Plate. They're a software company committed to building tomorrow's food business ecosystem today. And I have not talked to anyone who works with a food bank on our podcast yet. And I am so excited to introduce Natalie Jayroe. She is the president and CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank. Natalie, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, and we're excited to delve a little bit into the work that you do, because I think people will be surprised at their assumptions when they hear the word food bank and the work that you actually do. So first of all, give us a little bit of a context about where you are and the community that you serve.
Sure. So I serve South Louisiana from the Mississippi to the Texas border. I have a warehouse here in New Orleans. We have a second warehouse in Lafayette. We have purchased a third warehouse in Lake Charles, which is, of course, close to Texas. And we are renovating a warehouse right now down in the Bayou in Houma. So we know that there's 400,000 people that are food insecure, and that we should be distributing, if we're just covering the missing meals, we should be distributing about 70 million meals a year. So we know that at 40 million, we have a ways to go.
Yes, you do. But 40 million is still quite a large number just to even think about that.
Well, it's interesting. I loved hearing about your sponsor. It's interesting when you think about food systems. The reality is, and the good news for food security in our country, is that Americans throw away 40% of everything that we grow, manufacture, process, and prepare. So there's plenty of food to ensure that everyone has. It's not the quantity, it's the quality that matters. Obviously, it's about good nutrition. So food banks are that entity that we're a big logistics chain. How do we get this incredibly abundant resource that we have into the hands of the people that need it the most?
Right. So you, on a regular basis, and I don't know if normal is a word that you use very often, because I know your world is changing day to day, but in the case of normal operations, you're really there to connect the people that are suffering from food insecurity with the food that's available.
That is true. And an important part of how we do that is working through partners. So we have almost 700 partners, grassroots organizations, churches, schools, hospitals, community centers, councils on aging, anyone that you can think of that use food as part of its mission to improve people's lives. Yeah. That's our partner in neighborhoods and communities, because our goal is always to meet people where they're at and to provide this food as equitably as we possibly can.
Right. And so you're going to where they are. And when things aren't normal, if there's some kind of natural disaster or something hits a community, you're right in there as a first responder.
We are. We say that hunger is always a disaster, whether it's suffered by a single child or a senior citizen who's choosing between food and medicine, or an entire community that's affected by a natural or man-made disaster. It's only a question of scaling what we do. So we're always, and this is part of our focus on equity, we're always looking for where the need is the greatest so that we can focus our efforts in making the greatest possible impact in those areas where it's needed. And of course, when we have natural disasters or man-made, like the oil spill, an economic downturn, government shutdowns, we are able to respond on the spot and make sure that we're protecting people in their hour of greatest need.
Yeah, and the list of situations that can come up is really endless. I mean, but you're just there and available and focused on your mission. And do you have to have certain approvals? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. What was your question about approvals?
Yeah. Do you have to have certain status or approvals to be able to be in communities when emergencies happen?
We do. And one thing that I would say, about Louisiana is that we have a little bit of experience responding to disasters. So I feel like we do a fair job of it, meaning that I am always on the mass feeding task force if any hurricane comes through the state, because if it's coming to the state, it's going to hit the area I serve first. So long ago, the state has realized that when they start response, they need us at the table to kind of talk about what's actually going on and to be able to react to any situations that occur. It was interesting because after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, as a state, we started thinking about what would happen if a pandemic hit. And we signed a contract with the state years ago about storing and distributing non-medical model vaccines to very vulnerable communities. And the state quickly realized that the food bank system with all of our partners is the best practice for how we can reach these folks that would be in need. And while we haven't done it exactly like we contracted, we have stored vaccines during COVID. And we were a responder, as you saw, with food banks across the country during that incredibly traumatic experience for all of our people and all our families.
What great forethought. I hadn't thought about that, but if you have kind of pre-staged and made agreements ahead of time, then you're just thinking about all the different contingencies. And yeah, pandemics, obviously, that was fortuitous of you to have a plan in place.
The number one rule about disaster is that the plan goes out the window the minute the disaster actually hits. So it is relationships. It's about knowing who needs to be in the room when a disaster strikes, so that you can do your contingency planning and target your efforts to the disaster that's actually taking place. Right. So again, a lot of experience over the years, and seeing in every single disaster, whether it's hurricanes, they're all different. There hasn't been two situations that have been exactly the same.
Well, and right now you're in an area that is, for our worldwide listeners, which we do have, you're in an area of the United States that is prone more than some others, just north of the Gulf of Mexico, to receive hurricanes. I mean, hurricanes come up the Gulf quite commonly, but you talked about over your years of experience. So Natalie, real quick, I mean, you haven't always been in Louisiana. What did you do before that have you always been in the food bank business, or how did you even come to this?
So I've been in food banking quite a long time, close to 30 years now. And I actually started in Savannah, Georgia. So not so different a situation in terms of potential storms that could come. And I actually started from the hospitality industry. I worked for Hyatt Hotels, and I could see the food that was going to waste. And I was very interested in figuring out how we could use that food, and started asking questions and got connected to the food bank movement and joined the board. And eventually when the board approached me and said, is this something you'd be willing to devote your career to? It was an easy decision. It's been incredibly fulfilling. I feel like I have the best job, in the world. But in terms of disaster response, there were many times in Savannah. I can remember several times being in the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center there, as we were waiting to see whether a storm was going to turn or actually hit that part of the coast. So there's been over the years plenty of practice and tabletop exercises and thinking through what do we need. So for instance, for us, we have water, we have snack foods, we have cleaning supplies that we always put, in large quantities in our warehouse at this time of year, because we know exactly what people are going to need. And it's one of the reasons why we've increased our kitchen capacity. So our kitchen here at our Hareham facility was doing about 250 to 300,000 meals, and that rose to more than 1 million meals the year after COVID hit. So, and it was the number one thing, because if you think about very vulnerable people after a natural disaster where they don't have power and they can't cook, or you think about seniors that can't get out of their house during a pandemic, etc., they need not just groceries. In some cases, they need hot meals that are directly delivered to them. So it causes us to think, and that's kind of how I like to think about what we do. We responded to what the community was telling us that it needed the most. In Lake Charles right now, we have just finished up our summer feeding program, and that's a community that's still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura. And they were so thrilled at what we were able to do during the summer that they are doing an after-school feeding program that we'll participate in as well. And that's bringing more food security to those children in the Lake Charles area. That, where there may not be a grocery store nearby, or where their parents' transportation may not be what it needs to be, while that community continues to recover.
Wow. And you are going where the people in need are. I mean, there's other areas that you've identified. I think you mentioned oncology when we spoke before, and
Yes.
having food pantries.
So we are always thrilled when we can leverage the resource we have, which is nutritious food, against partners, services that they're providing to the community. And of course, healthcare is so important. So several years ago now, one of our new hospitals, the University Medical Center, asked us if we'd be willing to put a pantry into their oncology department. And we quickly accepted. And so people that are going through chemo treatments leave their treatments with a box full of the appropriate kind of food for their health situation. That's grown. We have a number of other hospitals and healthcare entities that have gotten involved with us since. So for instance, in the Lake Charles area, we're doing boxes that go home with geriatric patients who are released from hospital and need a little bit of respite in those first few days after they get home, and some food that's there so they don't have to struggle to get to the grocery store or find a way to get food for themselves. So it may look a little bit different, but love working with healthcare entities because we can do such good work, and the evaluation of our impact has really been stunning. And it's not so much, or not only the health impact, but just the peace of mind that a person that's going through chemo, that's really struggling, that doesn't feel well, that doesn't have to think about going home, getting themselves into transportation, getting themselves to the grocery store, finding some way to get food when they're going through such a rigorous treatment. So
right, the whole family is under duress, honestly,
yes.
with the stressful situation, the health impact, whether that's an older person, senior, or whether it's a younger family member that just might be having a health crisis. And
absolutely.
that peace of mind that you're able to just take one of those
thing off the plate.
One thing off the plate, exactly, that they can take care of.
For it. And then maybe that's resources that get freed up to do other things that a family needs. So
right, and other caregiving tasks too, because that can be overwhelming for family members or friends that are helping.
It absolutely can. So we're always thrilled when we can partner with other organizations that are providing valuable services to the community.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mobile market program right now, for instance, and it's one of many programs. Again, we actually tailor our programs to needs in our community. So in our rural areas, our grocery stores are struggling to stay in business. And we've had a few go out of business, or I think one is burnt down. And so now you have a rural community that has lost its only grocery store that sells fresh fruits and vegetables. So we have what we call a mobile market, and we actually purchase that food. It's not donated. We drive it into these areas that we call food deserts, and we make that food available to people at lower than retail costs, so that we're helping that community that has transportation issues is one of the things that are keeping them from being food secure. We help address that issue by bringing the grocery store to them.
Yeah. Again, just identifying the need and trying to meet it as best you can to serve the community and the people that are in the community. As best you can. But you're talking about your local area. You have obviously a huge passion for this. I love the energy that you're showing and how excited you are about the different programs that you're providing. But I know that you are a part of a larger organization that actually goes all across the country here in North America.
Absolutely. We are a member food bank of Feeding America, which I think has recently been named the largest domestic nonprofit organization or network in the country. And the reason we're the largest is that every county and every parish in the country is covered by a Feeding America food bank. There are 200 of us across the country, and between us, we're working with more than 60,000 partners. So it's really an incredible network. I am in love with it. I have been the whole 30 years I've been involved as a volunteer and as a staff member, because we get all the benefits of being grassroots oriented with our partners. So they're the ones telling us, here's the need, here's how you can best meet it. But then as part of this larger Feeding America network, we have capacity. And so we can go to Congress and say, here's what issues food insecure people are facing. Yeah. Or we can negotiate with the Walmarts, say, open up your stores across the country and give us your leftover produce and meat and dairy. We can help so many people, as we did, as Feeding America did several years ago. And the Walmarts of South Louisiana give us more than 10 million pounds of food a year. Good food.
Amazing.
Food that would go to waste. So
well,
I love having that capacity. And that's kind of how we think about ourselves, that we bring this 200,000 square foot warehouse here, the 30,000 we have in Lafayette, the other smaller facilities in Lake Charles. How do we use that capacity to benefit the community? So the more we can make our facilities resilience hubs is kind of what we're thinking about now. So they can do multiple things. For instance, my facility here can be a dormitory. So one big lesson we learned with disaster response is that in a worst case scenario, even our employees lose their homes. After Hurricane Ida, 15 of our employees lost their homes, and they were here working the entire time. So they were sleeping on their office floor. We got RVs donated to us for them to stay in. So I'm thrilled to say that now we have showers here. We've long had generators. We have a kitchen, so we can sustain. People can come here. We're safe and ready to go to work as soon as the situation is safe for our trucks to be out and about.
Right.
And you asked
Amazing.
about elections. And that's, a big part of being a partner with government is that we are seen as a responder. And there are different ways they give us credentials that allow us to go through all the roadblocks and things like that you have during a disaster that they have to ensure people stay safe.
And I just love how you're just trying to figure out how to utilize the resources you have to best serve, and then the scale that you have. And I call it leverage. I mean, you have the numbers to back up what you're saying as far as what people are needing. When you do testify in front of Congress or present information, you're actually experiencing all that across the locations here in the United States that you're serving. And the fact that you have the network that you have is just, like you said, so I think it's so impressive for me as an outsider to the whole business. But you also have another focus there in your local community, which I can see spreading everywhere, which is that whole sustainability for the community and them being able to grow and keep the food that they grow within the communities and trying to help them figure out how to market that. Can you share a little bit about how you're helping them?
We are so excited about this initiative. So, we bring food in from around the country, and when it's donated, our costs have typically been in the transportation cost to get it here and then in the handling costs. So a couple of years ago, we started to think that what if we could work directly with local farmers? Less than 1% of the agricultural land of Louisiana is used to grow produce because those farmers can't make a living doing that. They have to grow commodity crops. So what if we, instead of spending the money we do on freight, spend that money with local farmers? Is there a way to use our capacity once again to help these farmers become more self-sustaining and therefore the community to thrive. And again, I think it's another resilience issue, an equity issue, and addressing these long-term reasons why hunger exists. I mean, it's amazing, but a lot of our disadvantaged farmers in particular, which can be Native Americans, we have a large Vietnamese community that came here that fish, of course, our African American farmers. They have ways of life that they've had for so long. They're beautiful ways of life, and they're struggling to maintain those in the economy that we have. So what if we can use our capacity to strengthen what they do, what they bring to all of us as Louisianans? And interestingly enough, we had kind of put our toes in the water of trying to figure this out when COVID hit, and USDA did what I think is one of the most progressive things I've ever seen them do, which is to put some money into the local food purchase program, is what they've called it. So they made money available to every state in the country. Fortunately, because we work so closely with our agriculture department, they turned to us and said, what do you think? This is meant to help our disadvantaged farmers primarily, and also have the food go to people that are food insecure. And I just love that, because often those two parts of our food system are disconnected. We need to make sure our farmers are earning enough, to actually make a living. And then we need to make sure that people that are buying food can afford to buy the food. So I love the fact that we had these two aspects of the food system. We brought them together for the first time, and we're trying to work out how we can use our capacity to add something to the local food system to make it work. And in essence, what we've done is become a middleman that's taken out a lot of those costs that have to do with processing this food, getting it into a market, et cetera, by standing as that kind of in between. And that's why we added a line to our kitchen here in Harahan, and we invite farmers to come in, use it free of charge to do some value-added processing for their product. So that it lasts longer and potentially becomes shelf stable. That hopefully is a way that we can help. And we're doing something, we're talking with the mayor in Lake Charles on a project I'm so excited about. We want to call it Gateway to the City. And we want to do something similar, except maybe even a little bit larger, and then actually retail some of our local farmers and caterers business to people that are driving out of the state on I-10. So hopefully they'll come through, they'll stop by, they'll get some of that homemade boudin and other great kind of Louisiana food before they cross the border into Texas or something like that, since we have such a love for food in the state.
What a great idea. Louisiana does have some of the best food. That is absolutely true. And I think it's great that you're helping to figure out how to be that, like you said, that connector. In the food supply chain, often the source farmer and the end user just really don't know who each other is, but you're allowing that connection to happen and providing a bridge, and in the local communities.
Bridge
and hopefully
is a great way to put it. Again, we're not the experts necessarily in helping farmers market, but we can facilitate those kinds of technical assistance programs actually reaching the farmers, and we can help them talk to schools or hospitals or some other potential entities, long-term market potential for our local farmers. It's really fun to think about how we can be engaged in this work with some incredible people throughout our community.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone's focused on the missions that you have at hand, and the heart of the people that you're working with, and everybody's trying to, what is it? The rising sea raises all boats.
Lifts all boats. Yes.
Yeah,
it's a great way to put
close enough, but you're just trying to elevate the entire community, suppliers and users.
And use all of our resources as efficiently as we possibly can, because there is such abundant resources. I'd be thinking very different if I was in a different part of the world. But here in Louisiana, we can grow anything. We can grow year round. So that's not the issue with why our farmers aren't growing produce. The issue is they can't make a living doing it. They have to be in commodity crops if they're, so the small farmers are just disappearing more and more. It's kind of leaving us, which is a terrible loss, because I have to tell you, I've been to some of these farms, and oh my gosh, what a beautiful experience to sit down with these farmers that have these incredible histories and culture around this food, and they will cook you something that comes directly from their farm. I mean, it's something I wish everyone could experience.
Nothing better, I'm sure. Well,
Mhm.
it sounds like you have some unbelievable programs going on, and Feeding America across America really probably is in each local community, meeting the individual needs of that community, which are going to differ, like you said, depending on what they can grow, and the time of
Right,
the year and how all that distribution works, and try to do
right.
the best you can. But is there anything else you would like to share with us before we go today, Natalie? Any
Uh,
other programs you'd like to talk about, or
I
leave
think we've
our
covered a
listeners with a
lot.
positive word?
One thing I like to say is that food banks at their best are really a conduit for the community's generosity. So volunteers, for instance, for us, are the equivalent of another 52 full-time staff members a year. So if you go into our kitchen at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, you'll see about 20 volunteers around a table getting the meals prepared to send out to our seniors that day in Jefferson Parish and St. Bernard Parish. We could not do what we do without our volunteers. We couldn't do what we do without the food that gets donated to us. We couldn't do without what we do without the funding that comes our way. So, we really are kind of this big logistics puzzle that we're continuously trying to figure out, how do we bring all this incredible generosity and these great resources and do something positive with it. And it's just been a privilege to be able to do it for 30 years. No 2 days are alike. Because the situation always changes. So I never feel like I have the same job every day. So I don't get bored with it. So anyway, so it's a huge thank you, because I know it's true here in Louisiana. I know it's true in other places as well. But the culture here in Louisiana, particularly in South Louisiana, is very, very much about being our brother's keeper. And we've been through many disasters together. And our extended families that have lived here for generations pull together and help each other through each situation that they encounter. And I just think I love being part of that kind of community every single day.
Absolutely. Natalie, thank you so much for sharing. I think that is definitely the definition of what community should be. And it's so exciting to hear what Second Harvest Food Bank is doing there in your local community. And I guess I want to say to our listeners and viewers that to get involved in your local community in helping in whatever way you feel called to do that. I'm sure there are similar organizations where you live across the world.
Absolutely. And if
And
you
I
go to
also,
Feeding America, if you look at Feeding America, they have a website that can connect you to the Feeding America Food Bank in your community. But the people listening are probably connected to a church or a community center or someone else that is part of the chain that involves your local food bank. There's so many ways to plug in and be part of it.
yep. Great. Let that serve as an encouragement to all of you. And thank you so much to our sponsor for bringing this podcast to us, Farm to Plate. They are enabling better food supply chain management. You can find out more at farmtoplate.io.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.